All right, so this 1957 GMC 347/380, well, 394 cubic inch engine we built for Bourne Customs down in Texas had a misfire. Now we converted this engine to a electronic ignition. And so whenever you do that, you got two unknowns, one being the ignition module that we buy. It's a Petronix, and then of course spark plugs and plug wires or anything ignition related. So what was happening was when we revved the engine above 4,000 RPM, it was breaking up really bad. And if you look at these plugs, you can see that some of these are fouled pretty heavily. There's a couple that were firing okay. Now, you know what? One might assume, because when you pull these plugs out, that, oh, this thing's got a screwed up carburetor or something. Well, we rebuilt the carburetor. And I'm going to show you guys this here real quick. So, anyhow, the carburetor, now, for those who don't know, the DCI in the DCI Automotive and Motorsports stands for Don's Carburetor Incorporated. That's what I started my business as a carburetor shop back in 1981. And so I know carburetors pretty good. And I knew that this was not a carburetor issue. But, you know what? Whenever you have a misfire, you got to look at all avenues. So we had multiple problems, and it's because of the parts quality today with this engine running properly. First of all, this coil, we had bought a brand new coil for this because the Petronix takes a different coil, they recommend their coils for their ignition system, which we always buy. So anyhow, the first coil we had on this engine, we noticed that we had oil laying down inside the engine in areas that there shouldn't be oil. And we knew all our oil leaks were sealed up, so we're thinking, okay, what's going on here? And lo and behold, what happened was we had the coil mounted up here in the stock location on side, just like the factory did, which is not a good idea. You want to keep the oil or the coil sitting straight up and down. But anyways, all the oil had leaked out of the ignition coil, and when it did, the ignition coil was shorting out, and that was our first problem. And the engine would just quit running after a few minutes, and we didn't know for sure exactly what was going on there until we discovered that. Well then, after we got that working properly, when you bring this thing up to around 3,500 to 4,000 RPM, and we know we got brand new valve springs in this thing, and we know the valves are adjusted properly, we know the ignition timing set properly, and we know the carburetor's jetted properly. So we had a misfire. And so I told the guys, I said, you know what, let's change the air gap on the Petronix module inside this distributor, because you use a factory point style distributor. Remove the points and you put their module in there, and you set the air gap between the contact points for the points and the module you stick in there for Petronix. And if the air gap's too big, that will cause a misfire too. So we had to actually grind the part a little bit to get it to fit, so we could get an air gap of around 40 to 60 thousandths. They say up to 100 is good. I don't like to run them that far, so we modify it and make it work a little better. So anyways, we get that done, and we still have a misfire. So we had another engine that we had built a while back. I don't know, it's probably been about 2 years ago now. And we like Autolite spark plugs, but I do believe that Autolite spark plugs are being used or made in China now, not here in the United States. So on that engine, it was misfiring as well, anything over 3,000 RPM. And there's a little bit higher compression engine, so it's going to have more resistance, and that's going to make it misfire to lower RPM. Well, lo and behold, this one's doing the same thing, so I thought, okay, we're going to change the plugs because we know we've seen that before. And that's what we done this morning. And so what we have in here now is we got an NGK spark plug gapped at 35 thousandths. And we got our ignition timing set at 36 degrees total, which works well with a 3 3/4 inch stroke and 9 to 1 compression. And now we don't have a misfire anymore. So we're going to fire this thing up and let you guys hear it run again. Some of you already heard the video. That was another thing too. We had really killer throttle response. When the engine cranks over, you can tell if it doesn't have even compression or not, because the engine won't have a nice rhythm to it when you're cranking it before it fires. If you have a cylinder that is weak because the valve isn't sealing up, what it'll do is, instead of going na-na-na-na-na like it's supposed to, you'll hear it go na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na, and what that does is it's telling you that you got a cylinder that's not building any compression. So just a little tip for you guys whenever you're cranking an engine and trying to tell if the misfires a valve or not. So we're going to fire this dude up, and we'll run it here, and we'll bring it up to 4,000 RPM, and you guys can see how smooth she runs now. This thing has a really mellow cam in it. It's not real radical. So there you go. The camshaft in this is only, what is it, 204, 214, the cam? So it's got very little overlap on it. But this is going in a tow truck, big GMC tow truck. Alright guys, just wanted to give you guys an update what we found here to help educate people. So if you get a misfire, it's a good possibility you got a bad set of spark plugs.